Ananta Koti, Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya, Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem, Shri Kaho, Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita, Shri Gadadhar, Shri Radha Gaur, Bhakti Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radhashana Sundar, Gopa Gopinath, Shamakund, Radhakund, Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Mayapur Dham Ki Jai, Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Swami Ki Jai, Yamuna Mai Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Shri Mati Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Gopremanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga, all glories to Shri Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Krishna Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauranga Vacharani Vishesha Sundari Panchyati Desitarani. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayat Nasta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. Before reciting this Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, one should first offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and Srila Prabhupada, the translator and commentator. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering service unto the pure devotees, all that is troublesome to the heart is completely destroyed almost to nil, and loving service unto the personality of God to do its praise to its transcendental songs is established as an irrevocable fact. Hare Krishna. So we're reading today from Canto 3, continuing on. We're on chapter 6. We're at the end of chapter 6. Today's text is text 37. Ekanta labha vachaso napumsam Ekanta labham vachaso nupumsam Shushloka mauler gunavadam ahu Shushloka mauler gunavadam ahu Shrutesha vidvadbir upakritayam Shrutesha vidvadbir upakritayam Katha sudhayam upasam prayogam Katha sudhayam upasam prayogyam Ekanta labdham vachaso nupumsam Shushloka mauler gunavadam ahu Shrutesha vidvadbir upakritayam Katha sujayam upasam prayogam. Please chant. Shushloka moler gunavadam ahu Shuche shavidvabir upakritayam Katha sudhayam upasa prayogyam Ekanta labha Ekantalabdam Vachaso Nupumsam Shushlokamoler Gunavadam Ahu Shrutesha Vidvadirupakritayam Katha Sudhayam Upasam Prayogyam Ekantalabham Vachaso Napumsam Shushloka Upasam Prayogyam Ekantalabdam Vachaso Napumsam Shushlokamauler Gunavadam Ahu Shrutesha Vidvadir Upakritayam Katha Sudayam Upasam Prayogyam Eka Anta, the one which has no comparison. Labham, gain. Vachasa, by discussions. Nupumsam, after the Supreme Person. Shushloka, pious. Maule, activities. Gunavadam, glorification. Aho, it is so said. Shrute, of the ear. Cha, also. Vidvadbi, by the learned. Upakritayam, being so edited. Katha Sudhayam, in the nectar of such a transcendental message. Upasam Prayogyam, serves the real purpose, being nearer to. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. The highest perfectional gain of humanity is to engage in discussion of the activities and glories of the pious actor. Capital P, capital A, the pious actor. Such activities are so nicely arranged in writing by the greatly learned sages that the actual purpose of the ear is served just by being near them. One more time. The highest perfectional gain of humanity is to engage in discussion of the activities and glories of the pious actor. Such activities are so nicely arranged in writing by the greatly learned sages that the actual purpose of the ear is served just by being near them. Near what? Being near what? You have to say it louder.
The sages.
Yeah, to hear their katha. So by being near the sages, by being in proximity of people who like to hear and talk about Krishna katha, the real purpose of the ear is served. This is spoken by Maitreya. Om Agyanati Mirandasya Jananjana Salakaya Chaksu Umilitam Jaina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master forcibly opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I am indebted to Srila Prabhupada, life after life, and beg for service always, eternally, at his lotus feet. Hare Krishna. So before I start on the purport, let's just put it in perspective here. So this sixth chapter in the third canto, we had a very technical chapter, if you remember all those wonderful verses explaining about the creation of the universal form and all the technicalities, how this emanated from that, and that caused this, and this caused that, and things that are like, sheesh, took a while, it took an endeavor to think about and try to comprehend what was going on. So this section now, this is the end section of the chapter, starting from verse 35 to 40, whatever the last verse is. We're on that last part. This is now Maitreya Muni. So it began with Vidura asking questions of Maitreya. And although he wanted to start off in his beginning of this conversation with Maitreya, he wanted to start off asking directly about Krishna. He started off with a broader subject that would help everyone come to understand the glories of Krishna. So it's very systematically he's explaining these things. And this is the whole point of the Bhagavatam. These earlier cantos of the Bhagavatam. The one point of the Bhagavatam is to glorify Sri Krishna and his personal activities. That's done in the 10th canto primarily, but these beginning cantos are meant to prepare us and to help us develop the right attitude and the right understanding about the glories of Krishna and his potencies, so that when we do hear about his apparent human-like activities in the 10th canto, we won't be bewildered and degrade or think that those activities are actually on the human platform. They're not on the human platform. Krishna is not the quote-unquote ordinary human being. He is here, as described here, the pious actor. He's acting like a human being so that why? So that we can relate to him. So that we can relate to him and want to develop our love for him. I attended class at Krishna House on Wednesday. Chaitanya Charan Prabhu gave class there on Wednesday. And he was also speaking from the 3rd canto, but in a different section, on the section of the appearance of Lord Varaha. But in spite of that was the section, he immediately began his class explaining the concepts, the different philosophical and religious concepts people have about the Lord and what makes it relatable or non-relatable. For example, he was saying that by stressing the difference between the Lord, the qualities of the Lord, and the living entities, by stressing the difference, how the Lord is so all-powerful, how the Lord can do anything, how the Lord created the universe and such and such. It stresses for the living entity that it's like a distance. He's so far away, he's so powerful, he's so great, he's so omnipotent, and I'm so insignificant. It stresses the difference. Whereas in Vaishnava philosophy, the information is there, but also of the Lord's potency and his greatness and how he's more powerful than anything we can conceive of. But it also stresses our connection with the Lord. That we have a connection with the Lord, we have a relationship with the Lord, and that makes it attractive to us to develop that relationship. Anyway, it was thought a great point that I wanted to share with you. Hare Krishna. Anyway, so now in this section from 35 to the end of the chapter, Maitreya is expressing his humility, just like yesterday he was expressing in the verse yesterday. He was expressing that it's beyond my capability to explain the glories of the Lord, but I'm going to do so to the best of my ability, and that way my words will be chaste because they'll be faithful to what I've heard from whom? The previous sages who are, like in this verse, attached to the glories of the Lord, and therefore they're attached to glorifying the Lord, and therefore let my words, whatever I can remember from their discussions, let me repeat that and keep my words chaste. So again, in one sense, it's a little counterintuitive for an outsider to hear someone speak with such a degree of humility on such high topics, but it's actually a sign of spiritual advancement. In the material world, one always wants to put forward themselves as, so competent, so this, so that, I'm the best at this or that or this or that. But in a spiritual realm, one actually sees that I'm completely, dependent on the Lord for everything, for the air for my ability even to breathe, for the ability to even blink my eyes, for anything. I'm completely dependent on the Lord. Therefore, I'm so small and insignificant. Therefore, let me, that's a sign of advancement. That's a sign that the illusion of the self-importance that the false ego likes to impose on us is being washed away by that transcendental sound vibration. Here's the purport. Impersonalists are very much afraid of hearing the activities of the Lord because they think that the happiness derived from the transcendental situation of Brahman is the ultimate goal of life. They think that anyone's activity, even that of the personality of Godhead, is mundane. And this is the unfortunate position of somebody who takes to this impersonal philosophy. They're not seeing their conception of the Lord they minimize it so much so because they're stressing the oneness, and therefore they're minimizing the oneness and the difference, the Chinta Beta Tattva. So they're stressing the oneness of the Lord, and therefore they don't want to hear about anything that doesn't stress that oneness. Whereas the devotees, they get to hear all the different facets of the Lord. But the idea of happiness indicated in this verse is different, because it relates to the activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Supreme Personality, who has transcendental qualities. Srila Prabhupada even stressed this, even when he would talk in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita. Why are we interested in this battlefield of Kurukshetra? In actuality, we're not interested in a battle or this battle or that battle unless it's related to Krishna, unless there's a relationship to Krishna. And because the battle of Kurukshetra is specifically directly related to Lord Krishna, then the devotees consider all the details of that very interesting. The word Gunavadam is significant because the qualities of the Lord and his activities and pastimes are the subject matter for the discussion of devotees. So not only his qualities and his great omnipotence and powers, etc., in ruling and controlling the universal affairs, and not just that's another thing. A lot of religious philosophies, they stress the Lord's potency in relationship with creating the material world, which is obviously a huge accomplishment, but not for him. It's not a huge accomplishment, and it's not his only activities. It's a very insignificant activities for the Lord, this material world. And in fact, he's so potent that he designates and empowers other living entities and other parts and parcels of his very self to take care of the material world, and he's off enjoying in the spiritual world. Haribol, it's not like it's a strain. It's not like, sorry. It's not like that the outcome of the 2024 election in the United States is a strain on his brain. It's not his absorption. His absorption is in reciprocating and loving reciprocation with his loving devotees who can't exist for a second without, trying to please him. A rishi like Maitreya is certainly not interested in discussing anything pertaining to mundane qualities. Yet he says that the highest perfectional stage of transcendental realization is to discuss the Lord's activities. The highest perfectional stage of transcendental realization is to discuss the Lord's activities. So in the second canto of the Bhagavatam, 10th chapter, 1st verse, Vyasadeva is describing the subject matters of the Bhagavatam, the 10 subject matters of the Bhagavatam, creation being one of them, and the sub-creation being the other. This second and third canto talk about Sarga, the creation by the Lord, and Visharga, the creation by Lord Brahma, how he arranges the ingredients and creates the material world by Lord Brahma. But the point of all of those, and in actuality, although it lists the 10 topics of the Bhagavatam there in 2.10.1, it lists them, but in actuality there's only one subject matter of the Bhagavatam, and that is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It has these preliminary divisions, the 9 preliminary divisions, just to bring us to the correct understanding, so that when we hear from the 10th canto, the pastimes and activities of the Lord, we have a proper conception, a proper understanding. And we shouldn't be overconfident either about that ability, that the benediction that we get from reading and hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. Because even great personalities in different circumstances, sometimes they get bewildered, as the example of Lord Brahma. Lord Brahma, when he saw different residents of different planets and the residents of Vrindavan glorifying Shri Krishna for his mighty activities, he thought, is that same Supreme Lord that I worship through the Vedic mantras and through all these different rituals? That's him? Walking barefoot? Eating with his left hand? Having food in his left? That's like Hare Krishna 101. You're supposed to eat with your right hand. But there he was, having food in his left hand. And that's the Supreme Lord? So temporarily, he was a little bit bewildered, but why wasn't he like totally bewildered or totally, set back, was because of all that he's heard and his exalted position, etc., etc. So anyway, we need to repeatedly hear. That's the point. We need to repeatedly hear about the glories of the Lord, because it's Hiranyakashipu, I think, that said this very famous statement. Hiranyakashipu, when he was talking with his relatives at the death of his brother Hiranyaksha. Anyway, so I'll skip all the details of that story. He was saying how association is like a crystal stone, and it reflects whatever light comes into it. It reflects that light. So the point here about hearing is we need to hear about the glories of the Lord so that we can reflect those stories, those activities, reflect it through our, reverberate it with our tongue so that we can speak about the Lord. And in the Srimad Bhagavatam, somewhere, Prabhupada says, the holes in the ears are very, very small, comparatively speaking. They're very small. The ear holes are very small. But they have an unlimited capacity to hear. You can be pouring nectar, verbal nectar, that is, in the ear unlimitedly. And that's another pleasant, or some other word, benefit. That's another benefit from hearing from so many different people speak on the Bhagavatam, because everyone has a different aspect of realization, a different way of presenting it, and it's so interesting to get all of those different, like the crystal, reflecting all the different sides. It's the same light, but it in the different flavors of their realization that enhances our realization. Srila Jiva Goswami therefore concludes that topics regarding the transcendental activities of the Lord are far beyond the transcendental realization of the Kaivalya happiness. Kaivalya, that's what was referred to in the beginning part of the purport here, about the impersonalists, Kaivalya. They're thinking that the goal is to merge in that oneness and become one with the Lord. So Jiva Goswami is saying that the topics regarding the transcendental activities of the Lord are far beyond the transcendental realization of Kaivalya happiness. These transcendental activities of the Lord are so arranged in writing by the great sages that simply by hearing of those narration, one becomes perfectly self-realized, and the proper use of the ear and tongue is also achieved. So Srila Prabhupada stresses this, the proper use of all of our sensual activities, that Krishna has endowed us with, these senses, and the proper use of them is to engage in the service of the Lord, engage them in the service of the Lord. So, and again, in comparison to the different philosophical conceptions that different groups have, the process of bhakti, by engaging the senses in the service of the Lord, it's the easiest process to do. Just like when you read in the Bhagavad Gita, in the Krishna's explanation of the yoga ladder, the different stages of yoga, and the different results of performing, like 6th chapter, Ashtanga Yoga. Ashtanga Yoga, the entry level for performing Ashtanga Yoga is you have to take sannyas. That's how you start, taking sannyas. Now, like, what chance do we have of starting at that point? Especially in this fallen age, fallen Western, quote-unquote, culture. The concept of, leaving everything is the starting point. And not only just leaving everything, but leaving everything, going off to a forest, and not just a forest, a sacred forest, where you have to have make your own little sitting place that's not too high and not too low, has to be covered with the deer. So many rules and regulations just to start out. And then your beginning, quote-unquote, service, or your beginning stage is to meditate with your mind totally tranquil, with your eyes fixed on the tip of your nose, because your eyes can't be too open, because they'll be distracted by whoever or whatever is walking by or crawling by in the forest, or too closed, because they'll be easily nodding out. Just right, and meditate completely fearless on the Supreme Lord. That's day one. after you're in the forest there. But the process of bhakti is wherever you're at now. Use your senses, use your whatever, your ability to hear. Use that hearing process in the service of the Lord. Use your tongue to repeat. That was mentioned yesterday in class, to repeat what you've heard, and that makes the what you've heard become more solidified in your brain, a better understanding. And then it also is, just by repeating what you've heard, you're spreading transcendental knowledge. It's so, and what to speak of, all the different other aspects of devotional service. Everyone likes to sing and dance, so there's ways to do that in Krishna consciousness, and to engage others. And it's so easy, and that's why it's so attractive. And not only that, but the realization that one achieves through perfectly performing Ashtanga Yoga is very elevated, but not the most elevated. It's a step. It's like the yoga ladder. There's the rungs on the steps of understanding the Supreme Lord. Brahman, understanding the Lord, his all-pervading energy and light. Paramatma, understanding that the Supreme Lord's in the heart. That's another level of realization. But understanding that beyond all of those is Bhagavan, which includes the understanding of the previous two levels of realization. That's the highest level of realization. Understanding that we have a loving relationship with Him. And not only that, but that the Lord is encouraging us in every step of the way to come closer to Him, to reawaken that. And encouraging and helping along the way. As he says, he's impartial. For someone who wants to just engage in gross sense gratification and think that's, the goal in life, okay, fine. Give it a good try. Birth after birth, no problem. That's your choice. Someone who wants to be completely convinced that there is no God, that there's no he's not responsible for the results of his activities or anything, and then the Lord, okay, you can do that too. And not only that, but here I'll give you a little bit more information to prove to you how there is no God. Here's the information that you can, how you can be convinced. Someone who wants to understand that the Lord's in the heart, He gives, and someone who wants to understand that the Lord is the supreme enjoyer, that I'm His servant, that He has his own abode and everyone has a relationship with him, then Krishna, he becomes very inclined to help those persons on the way. Because, as we're quite well aware, it's not only by our endeavor, by our singular endeavor. We have to muster up the endeavor to be. We have to make our endeavor. Yes, that's there. But the Lord also reciprocates by helping us. There's just a little bit more. Okay. Probably use the ear time also too. Srimad Bhagavatam is one of such great literatures, and the highest perfectional state of life is attained simply by hearing and reciting its contents. Now, if that's not encouraging, I'm going to read it again in case you weren't like totally. Think about how encouraging that is. The highest. Okay, wait, I'll start. Srimad Bhagavatam is one of such great literatures, and the highest perfectional stage of life is attained simply by hearing and reciting its contents. Haribol. So let's make our endeavor. Some of the topics in the Bhagavatam are more easily understandable, and therefore easier to repeat to others. This particular section of the Bhagavatam with the creation of the universal form and how this came from that and this came from that and the senses are controlled by this demigod and this and that might be a little bit more challenging especially for a pea brain like mine. It's a little more challenging, but at the same time, the attempt to remember it and the attempt to speak about it, or something that you're more some pastime that you're more comfortable, that just increases the wonderful opportunity we have for more and more purification. And there's so many nice prayers glorifying the Srimad Bhagavatam, especially there's the famous 6 prayers by Srila Sanatana Goswami. It's in Krishna at the end of Krishna Lila Stava, or Srimad Bhagavatam. Sarva Shastradi Piyusa Sarva Vedaika Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnadya Sarva. What's the rest? Prangovinda Prabhu? Sarva Lokaika Drikprada. Thank you. I got the vibe from him. Srimad Bhagavatam, it's the perfection of all the Vedic philosophical conclusions. That's Srimad Bhagavatam, the perfection of that. And further down he says, this is the one that Chaturanga quotes all the time during his classes, "O Srimad Bhagavatam, O my only friend, O my companion, O my teacher, O my great wealth, O my good fortune, O my bliss, I offer my respectful obeisances to you. O my deliverer," that's another one. And the last verse of that stava, the 6 stanzas, "O Srimad Bhagavatam, O giver of saintliness to the unsaintly, O uplifter of the very fallen, please don't ever leave me. Please become manifest in my heart and my mind, and don't ever leave me. And my heart and my throat, so that I can always speak the Bhagavatam." Hare Krishna. Any comments or questions or discussions or corrections? Yes, Prabhu. All I can remember is their name begins with a B, but I can't remember anything else. Could you say it when you get the mic?
Hare Krishna Mata, thank you for the class. Bahushvara Das.
Thank you.
1,000 times Das.
Hare Krishna.
So you mentioned about I think it's called the Vaidurya Mani, the gem that actually reflects whatever it's near. One of my godbrothers, he was in South India, and there was a South Indian festival, and they brought out this beautiful deity, and it had a huge Vaidurya Mani.
Really?
And he said, whatever color would get near it, it would change, it would take on that color.
Wow.
And it's very rare, but it was it was a very big gem.
Yeah.
It was right in the forehead of the deity.
Wow.
So I think it's Vaidurya Mani. I think that's the name. I'm not positive.
Thanks. Yeah, and so then what is that? What are some takeaways from that? That's why we need to be careful of our association. Not only there's association that comes at us, and then there's association that we also go for, on our tablets and phones, etc., etc., etc. So it has an effect on the consciousness one sees. So we have to be very careful. Yes, Ragatmika ji.
Of course, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada stressed the importance of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. And you mentioned that sometimes it's a challenging section or what, and then what to speak, it might be, it's not a world-famous traveling preacher who's speaking the Bhagavatam, but someone who, we may not even, their language, they're not, English is not their first language, and it might be difficult, or whatever. But I have experienced that just by remaining faithful, steadily hearing the Bhagavatam every day, even I can't understand it or understand the person, or Krishna reveals through that sitting and hearing an answer to something I was toying with just the day before or something. It's amazing. Yeah. Reciprocation.
He reciprocates, yes. And another thing, sometimes people think that the speaker is the most important person in the class, but actually the Shastras describe that the listener is the most important person. Or they might say it in a different phrase, but that's how I'm saying it. The listener is really important because a good listener, like a swan, can extract that milky, watery, milky substance in the water. The swan can extract the milk from that. So a good listener can extract the nectar from whatever. If someone is attempting to, repeat what they've heard from the great sages, from the Srimad Bhagavatam, whatever. So the listener is very important, and that's emphasizing your quality of a good listener, and Krishna appreciates them. That's that reciprocation in quote-unquote small, little, quote-unquote insignificant instances like that. Those things are really important to recognize and hold on to. Krishna's reciprocating with your endeavor. Krishna's he is reciprocating, and he will continue to reciprocate with your endeavor. And that gives us what? It gives us encouragement to keep going. From where we are, we've said this a few times, but maybe you're different people and you haven't heard me say this so many times. From where we are now in our consciousness and our level of advancement in Krishna consciousness, and where we want to go, my arm can't even stretch that high, and where we want to go and be to be, interacting or participating in Krishna's personal activities in Goloka. It's a huge, it's incalculably distant. It's a huge distance. But Krishna, so our endeavor is important, but Krishna's mercy is also what's going to allow us to get there. And his reciprocation pulling us along. That's the point. Thank you. Hare Krishna. But it's good to remember that and not brush those things off as, well, that was just by chance. No, that's Krishna's reciprocation. Sri Devi Ji? A new baby for Krishna, a new servant just came in the room. Hare Krishna.
How come somebody like Hiranyakashipu can speak such great philosophies, and he knew everything about association and karma and so many topics, and then he did all that?
Well, there's a couple of ways you could explain that. One way is that was Krishna's pastime, because don't forget, Hiranyakashipu isn't Hiranyakashipu forever. He was acting as Hiranyakashipu. He was the Lord's dearest gatekeeper, and because the Lord wanted to fight, and it, quote unquote, in my words, it wasn't allowed in Vaikuntha fighting, so he arranged that his dear servant becomes covered by his potency, and completely thinks, I'm Hiranyakashipu, and I don't like Vishnu, and Vishnu killed my cousin, my brother, etc., etc. So that's who Hiranyakashipu is, like Kamsa too. Kamsa is somebody or other, you know what I mean? President Trump is somebody or other too. They're pure spirit souls, so they get covered by Krishna's illusory energy. So that's one explanation, and now I can't think of any other explanation. Anyone else want to part that, Prabhu? Yeah, they were born in great, yeah, thanks.
He's actually speaking a very high philosophy, but he's not really speaking it to enlighten his relatives and all his nephews. Basically, what he's doing is saying, he wants them to get over it so they can get back to their real business of trying to kill Vishnu.
Right, good point, thanks.
Another point I was going to mention is a very interesting purport in the Bhagavad Gita to the verse Vitaraga Bhayakroda, where Krishna says you have to become free from attachment, fear, and anger. And Prabhupada points out the fear that Krishna is referring to is the fear of a personal spiritual existence.
Yeah.
And he mentions the impersonalists, they're actually afraid of the concept of a personal spiritual existence and a personal Godhead, because everything they have experienced in terms of material bodily existence has been filled with temporary, full of misery and ignorance. And Prabhupada explains how they carry that material conception even if they hear about a personal spiritual existence. And Prabhupada said, you cannot overcome that until you hear from a pure self-realized soul. And I remember reading that years ago and thinking, we're so fortunate to be able to hear from Prabhupada. He can explain the personal nature of Krishna and the spirit soul in such a clear, concise way.
Such a way that someone who's completely ignorant can understand something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Thank you for bringing that point up. I thought of that actually after that class I attended at Krishna House this week on Wednesday that Chaitanya Charan Prabhu gave, and like a brilliant analysis of philosophies and this and that. And afterwards we were talking among some of the ladies there, and we were saying, that's a sign of somebody who's really brilliant. The more, different people can have good memories and this and that and speak and so many things. That's very advanced also. But I think it was Einstein or somebody who said, a real intelligent person can explain something really simply so that you can get it. And that's not easy. That's not easy when you're talking about concepts, different concepts like that.
He said if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, if you can't explain it, yes, true. So and then I remembered also too, since I've been here for a while, I used to hear classes from Sadhaputta back in the old days when we had a single wide mobile home over in that area. Sadhaputta would give these classes, and he'd give these classes on whatever, but it could be on anything, and he would say, there's a lot of interesting things you could say about that. And then he would go on to explain, like the position of the stars and the planets and the this and the that. But he would explain it in a way that while I'm listening, I'm thinking, yeah, I get it. And then after class, I'd say, and class was so good. It was all about, I didn't stay very long. But he could explain it so that you could get it. Anyway, sorry. That's just my personal experience. Hare Krishna. Other comments or questions? Is that a Pundarik hand? Please. Hold on. We'll wait. It's important.
In Uttar Pradesh, there's a nice story about how learning austerities and sacrifices can be imitated by demoniac persons. I mean, they can engage in such things.
Yeah.
But there's three qualities were there, and three qualities that can't be imitated. I don't know, maybe cleanliness, truthfulness, and mercy. I'm not sure exactly. They can't be imitated by demoniac persons.
Oh, nice.
What was it? Learning austerity and what?
I'm not sure. I can check it up. I think maybe cleanliness, mercy, and forgiveness.
But the other three?
Austerity, sacrifice, and
Penances?
learning. Yeah.
Oh, learning, yeah, can be imitated. And that just reminds me of the Nectar Devotion chapter that talks about the symptoms of bhava. There's symptoms of bhava that one could be rolling on the ground and this and that and this and that, but those are you could imitate those physical symptoms, but the real symptoms of bhava are, you don't want to waste time. I can't remember the others, but there's unimitable symptoms of bhava, of always thinking of Krishna, etc., that really are the essence of it. So anyway, I guess one of our take-home points, because there's always a take-home point from the Bhagavatam. It's not that we hear the Bhagavatam and then we leave it here, and then we go out and do our duties and this and that. And one of the take-home points is that let's try to speak more about what we've heard, not necessarily today's class, but maybe yesterday's class or anything, heard, and create that atmosphere of always remembering Krishna. And then here's your assignment, okay? Here's your homework. Just in case the people on this side of the room, because sometimes the people on this side of the room don't get to see the details of the deities, like Krishna and Balaram deities. My suggestion is you don't leave here this morning until you find the milk pot, the 2 birds, and the ribbon. That's all I'm going to say, okay? You have to find them. It's on that side of the altar. Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Shri Ekadasi Vrata ki jai, Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol.